"You there, be quick with the drinks. Waiter, we don't have all day." The insult landed like a slap across the garden air, sharp enough to cut through the string quartet's music. Madison Clark, blonde bun, champagne satin gown plunging low across her chest, diamonds glittering in the afternoon sun, smirked as she raised her voice high enough for every guest to hear. She didn't stumble. She didn't whisper. This wasn't a mistake. It was theatre. Gasps fluttered through the white canopied garden. A few chuckles followed, the kind that sliced deeper than the words themselves. Eleanor Pierce, wife of a senator, threw back her head and laughed like it was the wittiest thing she'd ever heard. Two men near the marble fountain smirked, glancing at one another. Even the quartet faltered, bows trembling mid-string. At the center of it all stood David Langston, 6'2", broad-shouldered, immaculately dressed in a tailored ivory linen suit. His tie satin silver. His watch, Patek Philippe, understated, deadly precise. His shoes, black Oxford, polished to a mirror's edge. Everything about him spoke of quiet elegance, but in his hand was the single detail Madison needed, a glass of champagne held for a friend. That was all it took for her to label him. Not a guest, not an equal, a waiter. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now back to David. Madison wasn't done. She leaned closer, voice dripping venom, masked as charm. Honestly, some people think money buys them a seat here. But class, she let her eyes travel down his suit, pausing long enough to sting. That can't be bought. Laughter erupted again. Eleanor joined in, calling out, "At least serve us right, boy." Her words floated across the garden like poison perfume. A few guests turned away, unwilling to interfere, their silence more damning than their laughter. David didn't flinch. He didn't move. His gaze remained steady, locked on Madison, unreadable. To the untrained eye he seemed passive. To those who knew better, his silence was the loudest thing in the garden. The irony of it all nearly amused him. Around him, wealth dripped from every surface. Roses imported from Florence, linens pressed with gold embroidery, crystal flutes, catching sunlight like prisms, a stage for power, a playground for privilege. And here he was, the man who would soon own the very ground they stood on, being mistaken for the help. It wasn't the first time. 20 years earlier, fresh out of grad school, he had walked into a gala with a thrift store suit and a binder full of pitches. A man in velvet shoved an empty glass into his hand. "Top this up, boy," he'd said. That humiliation had burned, then hardened. It never left. It became fuel. Now, decades later, the cycle repeated. Different faces, same script. But the ending would be his to write. David adjusted his tie, calm, measured. The garden quieted slightly, guests waiting for him to break, but he didn't. He lifted the champagne glass, not as a servant, not in surrender, but with deliberate grace. Then he set it down on a passing tray and straightened once more. Silence rippled outward. Some saw weakness, others saw a storm. Madison saw neither. She pined, mistaking his quiet for compliance. To her, this was victory. To him, it was positioning because David Langston had no need to raise his voice. His silence was sharper than any blade, his patience more dangerous than her taunts. And Madison Clark, in all her satin and arrogance, didn't realize she had just signed the opening line of her own downfall. Time was ticking, and the garden would soon belong to him. David didn't move. Not when Eleanor laughed. Not when Madison's friends snickered behind jeweled fingers. Not when the word boy hung in the air like a whip. He simply straightened his tie, the faintest adjustment, and let the silence stretch. That silence unnerved more than anger ever could. Madison mistook it for weakness. She tilted her head, eyes glinting with satisfaction. "See, not even a word. That's what I thought." She turned half her body toward Eleanor as if to invite applause, and she got it. Eleanor chuckled again, her pearls rattling against her chest. But at the edge of the crowd, not everyone was laughing. Julian Cross, 30 years old, banker in a pale tux, leaned forward, his voice cut sharper than the quartet strings. "That's not a waiter, he's a guest. Show some respect." Head swiveled. Madison blinked. Then the smirk returned whiter than before. A guest in that suit. She let the words drip slow, scanning David's ivory jacket as if it were a costume. "Please." A ripple of unease moved through the garden. Some guests glanced at David more carefully now. They saw the tailoring, the subtle watch, the shoes polished like glass. This wasn't a rented tux. This wasn't knockoff class. But still, skin and prejudice spoke louder than fabric. David's eyes shifted briefly toward Julian, an almost imperceptible nod. Not gratitude, acknowledgement. Then his gaze returned to Madison, steady, unreadable. He remembered another night years ago, 22, fresh out of grad school. He had walked into a hotel gala with nothing but a second-hand suit and a folder of pitches. He had been mistaken for staff then, too. Someone shoved an empty glass at him and ordered, "Top this up." He had taken that sting home, let it burn, and used it to fuel every late-night deal, every acquisition, every ruthless climb. That humiliation had turned into empire, and now here it was again. Different garden, same script. Sophia Wynne, camera in hand, shifted quietly at the perimeter. Her lens tilted, locking onto Madison's sneer. She tapped record. The faint red light blinked to life. She wasn't sure yet why she filmed, only that something about David's stillness told her this moment mattered. Julian tried once more. "Seriously, Madison, enough. You're embarrassing yourself." But Madison laughed, tossing her golden bun back. "Embarrassing myself? Darling, I'm saving this event from pretenders." She turned toward David again, lowering her voice just enough to sting. "Don't get too comfortable. Waiter, the real guests notice everything." David exhaled slow, almost inaudible. His chest rose, then settled. Inside, his mind was already moving, pieces aligning, signals ready. From across the lawn, his assistant, Carla, caught his eye. One subtle nod. Her phone was already in her hand. The champagne glass had been an accident. Madison's insult had been predictable. But what came next that would not be an accident, because David Langston was no stranger to humiliation. He had been forged in it, and he knew better than anyone. Humiliation is only power if you accept it. He never did. He never would. Madison smiled, thinking she had won the moment. She didn't realize she had just triggered the storm. And storms never announce themselves with thunder first. They begin with silence. The garden wasn't silent anymore. It buzzed soft, sharp, ugly. A cluster of women near the fountain whispered behind jeweled hands, their eyes darting to David, then back to Madison as if waiting for her cue. One man in a navy blazer muttered, "This is awkward." Yet he didn't step in. He sipped his wine instead, choosing comfort over conscience. Eleanor Pierce leaned on her cane and smirked. "Darling, you're too kind," she told Madison. "Events like these don't need distractions." Her voice carried, a stamp of approval for the insult already hanging in the air. David remained still, his presence somehow growing heavier with every second he refused to break. But to Madison, his silence was submission. She thrived in it. "Look at him," she said, louder now, ensuring the far tables heard. Not a word, not a protest. Exactly what I'd expect. She lifted her champagne, a toast to her own cruelty. A few nervous chuckles followed. No one corrected her. Sophia and Wynn's camera didn't waver. Her finger stayed pressed to record, the faint hum of focus locking in on Madison's smirk. She caught Eleanor's laugh. She caught the hesitant chuckles. She caught every ugly second. Julian Cross's jaw tightened. "Enough," he said again, but softer this time, drowned out by the chatter. His protest felt small against the tide of indifference. Madison turned her eyes back to David, savoring his silence. "See, he knows his place." The phrase hit harder than the first insult. A wave of discomfort rolled through the garden, but still no one moved. David didn't blink, didn't shift, only exhaled slow and steady, as though he had seen this scene play out 1,000 times before. And in truth, he had what no one realized was that his silence wasn't retreat. It was calculation. And soon, the very crowd laughing at him would remember this moment not as Madison's victory, but as the instant before everything changed. Julian Cross couldn't take it anymore. He pushed his chair back, the scrape of wood on marble cutting through the chatter. Eyes turned toward him, not because anyone expected a young banker to change the mood, but because his defiance broke the polished rhythm of the afternoon. "That's enough." "Madison!" he said louder this time, voice carrying across the garden. "You don't speak to a guest like that." The laughter wavered. A few chuckles died in throats. But Madison, perfectly poised, didn't miss a beat. She angled her body toward Julian, hand on her hip, diamonds catching sunlight. "Oh, relax. It's a party. We're all just having fun." Her smirk widened. "Unless you actually believe he belongs here." She tilted her head toward David, making him an exhibit instead of a man. Gasps rose. Some guests shifted in their seats, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. Julian's jaw tightened. "I believe in basic respect." Madison laughed, a high-cutting sound. "Respect is earned, darling, and I don't see it." The words hung like smoke. Elelana Pierce clapped slowly, approving, while Richard and Laura Sterling exchanged uneasy glances. Caught between loyalty to their peers and the discomfort brewing in their stomachs, David still hadn't moved. His silence had become an immovable wall. Every insult hurled at him seemed to splinter against it, shattering before it ever reached him. That silence spoke louder than anything. Madison said it unsettled the crowd in ways they couldn't name. Sophia and Wynn adjusted her camera angle, zooming slightly closer. Her lens captured Julian's anger, Madison's smirk,